Hello, Ofenbewis. First off, I'm sorry about the brief hiatus. The last week I've been logging extra shifts at work, and I've been tied up in other academic pursuits, which aren't very interesting, so I won't go into them. What you referred to about the Americans with Disabilities Act, I can understand. I can see how such acts, while perfectly fitting the definition of discrimination, as far as I understand it, would be excusable. It's hardly unjust, in my opinion, to prevent someone with, say, really bad shakes from doing a job that entails cutting hair, performing surgery, or handling nitroglycerin. Likewise, I can see how it would be completely understandable to refuse to hire as a sign language interpreter someone with no hands. All this I can understand, and I say this as someone who has been on the receiving end of this very mentality, though not the exact law in question. Apparently, a psychological analysis reveals me to be insufficiently stable to be in a high-pressure situation with a loaded weapon, and that's why the Navy sent me packing. Keeping me in would have been a recipe for disaster. I can understand the prudence of that and accept the decision with no resentment. Yes, I did not mention health. I also did not mention many other characteristics. There are countless ways in which one person can vary from another, and I don't believe I could name them all in one video without making the video a great deal longer than necessary to establish my point. If I come across a 400-pound hemophiliac, I'm inclined to believe that this is someone in this state against his or her will. Surely this is someone who, given the option, would opt not to be this way. But this hardly disagrees with my point, that the origin of the characteristic in question does not always have bearing on how such people are to be treated in the context in question. In the context of the discussion about whether or not same-sex marriage should be legal, the question of the origin of homosexuality is a red herring, an attempt to change the subject or to confuse the issue. I am brought to wonder, though, what if my heart were set on such a job, and in my efforts to obtain it, I encountered a health limitation? What if the limitation were something of which treatment is available? I can see how I might be compelled to examine the availability of that treatment. Now, what if in the process of my consideration I came across someone who had the same affliction, and for whom the treatment was available at the proverbial drop of a hat? What if I then conversed with the individual in question and found that he or she had been offered the treatment, but had declined due to a simple lack of interest? I would have some trouble understanding that, but not accepting it. That is to say, I would have some difficulty understanding why someone would decide in such a way, but no trouble understanding that someone has made such a decision. This is all reminiscent of a discussion I had with a Christian friend of mine. We were discussing the subject of the female submariner, since in the Navy I had gone to the submarine force, where currently women are not permitted to serve. One of the reasons for this is the premium placed on space aboard a sub and the subsequent premium placed on privacy. Ostensibly, so I've been told, the average woman has greater privacy needs than the average man, the like of which cannot be practically accommodated within the current submarine environment. This is one of the arguments against it. Also, as a result of the premium placed on space, sometimes it is necessary to have three people rotating through two racks. While A is sleeping in rack 1 and B is sleeping in rack 2, C is on watch. Then comes the time for A to wake up, have some breakfast, and come take over for C, who goes to have what for him is dinner, follows that up with cleaning, studying, and working out, showers, and goes to sleep in rack 1. Then comes the time for B to wake up, have some breakfast, and come take over for A, who goes to have dinner, cleans, studies, works out, showers, and goes back to sleep in rack 2. Then comes the time for C to wake up, and you get the idea from there. Often in this practice, when one gets into the rack, it still has residual heat from whoever just got out. So this practice is called hot racking, which was a term my mother always hated. Now, it's a real recipe for controversy to have male and female crew members hot racking together, and the Navy, as you might expect, has an aversion to controversy. So this is another argument against it. Now, please understand, I'm not making this case. I am hardly an IO psychologist or a governmental decision maker. I know that the Australian submarine force manages gender integration, as well as the astronaut corps, and astronauts work in closer quarters than submariners. But all this is a digression. I had postulated to her that one day, when technology is advanced enough that space is no longer at such a premium, these will no longer be problems, and women will be allowed to serve aboard subs. Her response was surprising. She actually asked, "Why in the world would any woman want that?" I was astonished. Normally in this discussion, it's the guy who spouts this rhetoric. Curiously, I felt compelled to argue the other side. I said, "Indeed. And why would any woman want to be a soldier? It's the chance to spend morning, noon, and night ducking bullets, if you're lucky successfully, and working harder than you've ever imagined, outdoors in all kinds of weather, not getting enough sleep, for months, sometimes years at a time, worrying about your paycheck every time Congress meets, all for the chance to die thousands of miles away from home. And why would any woman want to be in law enforcement? It's hours and hours of paperwork, broken by the occasional life and death situation. Why would any woman want to be a surgeon? Why would any woman want to spend all day wading through guts and bodily fluids?" At this point, she actually responded, "Why would anyone want to be a surgeon?" I sighed, but continued listing such examples, hoping to drive home the point that if you allow yourself to be persuaded by this reasoning to condone one glass ceiling, you condone them all. I finally got through to her about this when I used the example I should have started with. I said, "Why would any woman want to be a pilot? It's hours of boredom broken by the occasional several seconds of high stress." She had recently spent time trying to become a pilot, so this example hit home. This is kind of a tangent, but I can tie it in. The reason the guy with a medical condition does not want to avail himself of the treatment is not my business. By the same token, I know that there are women out there who want to serve aboard submarines, whose drive to this end is sincere, and the reason for that drive is no concern of mine, or anyone's. One would indeed have no reason to ask, except to open up the opportunity to say, "I don't understand your reason. It's not good enough, so I will deny you this opportunity." But now that I've said that, it occurs to me that this is all a ramified digression. What are the qualifications for marriage, is what you asked. Well, first, it seems to me that you're drawing a false comparison. I don't see how the relationship between employee and employer is analogous to the relationship between spouses. Indeed, I'm at something of a loss to understand exactly what the relationship between spouses consists of. Perhaps this is attributable to the fact that my parents divorced when I was 3, and I'm not trying to sound existential, but what exactly is marriage? What does it equate to? I infer that it is preceded by a proposal which is customarily made in a state of anxiety, and if accepted, such is usually done in astonished elation. But anxiety over what? What is being proposed? And elation over what? What is being accepted? It is surely not an official declaration of monogamy henceforth, because in that case the term group marriage would be a contradiction, and the term polygamy would not exist. And by contrast, the term monogamy would not exist, just marriage. Is it a legal recognition of mutually accepted reciprocal bondage? Because if that's the case, then artistic symbolism would seem to suggest that the two rings should have a chain between them. So I did some cursory research. Marriage. Several definitions here. 1a, the legal union of a man and woman as husband and wife. And that's just the first definition in the current edition. 1b, the state of being married, wedlock. Well, what's married? Further down, married. 1a, having a spouse. So marriage, the state of being married, is the state of having a spouse. The state of being united in matrimony. The state of, or relating to the state of marriage, which is less than helpful. The state of being acquired through marriage, that sounds terrible. The state of being closely connected or united. Now, that's all modifying this definition of marriage to include the definitions of married. Going back to the definitions of marriage, 1c, a common law marriage. So if a marriage is a common law marriage, then a common law marriage is a common law marriage, which is a common law marriage. Marriage. A union between two persons having the customary, but usually not the legal force of marriage, a same-sex marriage. Now, 2, a wedding, a close union. 4, under games, the combination of the king and queen of the same suit, as in pinochle. But it described being married as the state of having a spouse. So then what's a spouse? A marriage partner. So marriage is the state of being married. Being married is the state of having a spouse. and a spouse is is a marriage partner. So marriage is what it's called when you get a marriage partner. And a marriage partner is what you get in marriage. It's circular logic here. So maybe someone watching this can offer a more helpful explanation.